Thank you for your introduction. So my name is Shohei Katakura from Meiji University. So today I'm going to talking about the method to use a 3D printer as a robotic manipulator by using our idea of printed end-effector. So this work is done with my colleague Yuto Kuroki and Professor Keita Watanabe. So here's an example of our system. So 3D printer print out the object is a gear, so then assembling printed object. So our system enables 3D printer to manipulate printed object, not only print out object. So people use a 3D printer in order to print 3D object. It's an absolutely obvious purpose. So because a 3D printer is a 3D printer, right? So, but current commodity 3D printer, it is a fused deposition modeling 3D printer. So this printer is not special form mechanically. For example, the right side machine, this machine moves things around using that picking hand and effector. So a 3D printer and these machines are mechanically almost same. So the head of this machine, which is called end effector, so do something in 3-axis XYZ Cartesian coordinate system. So these machines are called gantry robot or 3-axis Cartesian coordinate robot. So the only difference between these machines is the end effector. The end effector is a function of this machine. The 3D printer has plastic filament to print out 3D objects, and the right side machine has a hand-like end effector to move things around. So the 3-axis robot is used as various things such as a pen plotter or laser cutter and the milling circuit board, etc., etc. So, but these machines are mechanically almost same. So the only difference is end effector. So our idea is printing out end effectors and operate them using actuator system of the printer. So it enables beyond the printing, such as assembling printed object, or breaking support material on the 3D build plate, or actuating printed object on a build plate without human intervention. So, but why do we want to do with only a 3D printer? So our motivation is to enable multiple operation with only 3D printer. So a lot of 3-axis manipulation robot, in particular, the fabrication machine, become the personal desktop size and affordable now. So however, machines are separated by purpose and function, unfortunately. So this means we need so much space and cost to use all function. So it is difficult to put them all at home or office. So this means using them all is difficult in personal spaces. But it is not the first idea to operate multiple things with one personal 3D printer in HCI or consumer product. So for example, so in this research, a 3D printer has a milling head to modify a 3D printed object on the 3D printer. And this 3D printer head has a wire feeder, so this can fabricate a solenoid motor. So, and in this research, so they use the 3D printer as a manipulation robot for example, like manipulating touch interaction by embedding stylus pencil. And in consumer products, so Snap Maker is a modular 3D printer. So this end effector is changeable or swappable. So this machine can 3D printing, laser cutting, and CNC engraving or something. So our research is also combine some operation with one 3D printer. But our idea is use a design 3D model and end effector and print out them and operating print object using printed end effector. Now this means we can use only the 3D printer itself. So this means like you can define a function of the printer by software and modeling, and this means modeling end effector and print out and use it. So now I'll show you a detail of how 3D printer head work as a manipulator using the printed end effectors. So here I'll explain fabrication process of this kinetic object. So to make this kinetic object using usual 3D printer, so we need to attach support material and remove material. So we're printing separately and assembled by human hand after the printing. So these manual post-processing is tedious and time-consuming, I think. So I think this is a big negative side of the 3D printer. So to use 3D printer as a robotic manipulator, remove these human manual time-consuming things, I think. So in this presentation, I'm more focused on assembling process. So to make that Lego figure up and down kinetic object without human intervention, a 3D printer has to do two assemble process. So one is a folding bevel gear. So print out a flat gear, and after printed out, picking an end effector and folding and making a bevel gear. So bevel gear means that gears that are orthogonal to each other. So, and another is connecting bevel gear and the body of a kinetic object by sliding the body. Yeah, like this. So to achieve these manipulation, so we designed two attachments. The one is to pick up end effector from the bevel plate. The another is drop off that pick up the end effector. So this attachment was also made by also 3D printer. So after print out, first of all, the 3D printer has to be printed end effector. So in order to join the end effector to the extruder, so the extruder goes down to the bottom of the end effector, and then the joint is locked. So after being connected to the extruder, the end effector peels off from the build plate by the extruder pulling up. So the mechanism of attachment and the end effector is like this. So this has an interlocking system. So this is it's easy to insert, but difficult to pull out. So, and the printable end effector has three parts. The one is a joint, that is a part of connecting to the extruder. The two is the function. So we can design freely here, that depend on what we want to do in 3D printer. So in that assembly process, so we use this hook-like shape. So 3 is a mechanism to peel off from build plate easily. So let me describe about these things. So this is the side of the end effector. So this is here is a mechanism of detaching from build plate. So the blue color part is easy to peel off from the build plate. The green one is not. So I'll describe later how partially easy to peel off. So to pick up end effector, the blue one is lifted up, and the end effector is split off around there. After the picking up end effector, so folding gear into the bevel gear. So the gear has a snap joint mechanism. The flat gear stand by this mechanism, like picking up end effector and the fold and like this. So and by sliding the body on the build plate, they are connected, the body and the bevel gear. So to remove unexpected motion of the body, so we printed also guideline rail on the 3D printed build plate. And after assembly, the printer remove end effector like this. So this means end effector is exchangeable in fabrication process. So inside of the mechanism is like this. So by pushing left side of the end effector, the joint of the end effector is bended and unlock interlocking mechanisms. Then the joint, then the end effector drop off. So, and in order to manipulate the printed object on the build plate, so the object has to be for that purpose. So this means, so we need to make partially easy to peel off from the build plate and make partially difficult to peel off. So this is again end effector again. So as I said, so I want to peel off this part from build plate, but I don't want to peel off this part. So how to do it? So first, to prevent the peeling off, so we need to calibrate the distance between extruder and the build plate to so small. It's almost pressing the build plate. So this distance is too smaller than the regular printing calibration. So by this small distance, the filament extruder press the filaments to adhere them firmly into build plate. So this is a backside of the bottom of the end effector. So this surface is difficult to peel off because of that calibration. So, but here's easy to peel off. So because the surface has small pillars shape, so they are about approximately 2 millimeter diameter and a 2 millimeter height. So this reduces the contact surface between printed object and the build plate. So this prevent pressing filament by pressing printed object by extruder. So that's why easy to peel off. So this is a simple demonstration. So left one is a 4 centimeter by 5 centimeter rectangle with a hook and without a pillar. The right one is the same rectangle with a pillar. So left one is difficult to peel off. So that's why end effector is broken. So right one is with a pillar. So this is really easy to peel from the build plate. So this pillar is also attaching to the gear and the body. So that's why we can folding this gear and we can move the kinetic object's body. So, and in order to print, pick up, and effect assemble object or other manipulation on the 3D printer, so we implement a G-code generation software. So I implemented a custom Grasshopper component to generate the G-code. So Grasshopper, could be you may know, so like Grasshopper is a visual programming language in Rhinoceros CAD as a consumer CAD software. So I briefly introduce our custom Grasshopper component. So user input CAD model and other information like assembly path and the tip position of end effector, etc. So finally, these components generate the G-codes. So this component generates G-code of 3D print, and this component generates G-code of pickup and effector, and this code generates G-code of assembly. Then finally, gathering these G-codes, so the 3D printer printing out and picking up end effector and assembling something end to end. So I've shown our system with mainly assembly process, but we think possibility of our system is not only assembly printed object. So as an application, so is a braking support material. So this is the same context of the assembly process. In the 3D printing fabrication process, we have to remove support material manually after print out. So in this application, 3D printer breaks support material and remove it. So we designed a custom support material. These like slants, like 45 degree of support material, and I conducted the stress simulation. So this structure broken from at the red color position. So that's why this is broken and blown off from the build plate. And this breaking support material and assembly things is combining one fabrication process. For example, like picking up end effector, break, and picking up end effector and folding up and sliding or something. And other application is actuating printed object after print out. So this application is a bit more like conceptual, but this Kohi mill is actually working. So could be this taste could be new horizons. I don't know. Yeah. So this application is using 3D printer as a power source or actuator. So limitation of the future work. So as a limitation, some printed models are constrained in size. And for example, the bevel gear cannot be smaller than the inserted snap fit mechanisms, and the assembled mechanism cannot fit very tight because 3D printer cannot apply strong force to XY direction. So therefore, highly precise mechanism or more tightened connection is really difficult in our system. So, and as a feature work, now assembly process and attaching pillars and the support material are designed by our experiment, and it highly depend on the object. So this means we haven't formulated and haven't implemented a computational algorithm. So at the future work, so we want to implement auto generation assembling paths or pillars or support material. So in conclusion, so we introduced method to use 3D printer as a robotic manipulator using the idea of printed end effector. It supports fabrication beyond the printing, such as assembly and remove support material, and actuate the printed object without a human intervention. So thanks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, we have time for questions from the speaker, for the speaker. So I'll get us started, but come on, we've got coffee coming next, so I'm sure somebody has a question out there. So this is really cool. Right now you can print these new end effectors to actually help in the assembly process. Presumably you can actually do this somewhat iteratively, right? Mm-hmm. You can print end effectors that help you build more complex end effectors to then help with the assembly process.
Yes.
So maybe just to ask the question that I assume everyone is thinking, how can we stop the robot apocalypse now?
How can we start with?
How is it possible to still avoid a robot apocalypse? You have given them the ability to use tools and build their own tools. Maybe more seriously, what does the final specification look like? So if you're going to write this software that you mentioned in the future work, where it can actually plan out some of these steps, what does the final specification look like when I want sometimes
this project? This project?
Yeah, I mean, well, does it look like I need to specify where power needs to be added if I want to turn the coffee mill, or I have to add some notion of like what tools already exist, or maybe just say a little bit more about how you're thinking about that?
Yeah, so what the next? So this is what the next of this project or something like So the next is automatically. So we need to design the support material or pillar to manually experimentally, but it's also like I don't want to design like these things. So the future work is automatically generating, geometrically analyzing and attaching or something.
So you just have the final mechanism, and then you let it figure out how to build that based on what it knows.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right. Other questions? Going once, going twice? All right. So there's coffee